public eye. So he came up with this concept of an at-home day where you literally throw the doors open and everybody in one day. Not only to enjoy a great flight, but also to meet people, to actually walk around, to see some of the equipment on the ground, to interact wherever that is possible. Really, for those 104 years, with a few years off, maybe around about late 1930s and 1940s, that tradition has continued. Today, this is the last remaining Royal Air Force show. I still like to think of it as an at-home. You have come to our home today. I do hope that you enjoy to stay with us. Most importantly of all, don't just, we're all here for great flying, absolutely. There's so much to do on the ground. Please make sure you do have time to wander around. Dig right into all the hangars at the back. A lot of effort, a lot of work has gone in throughout the year to bring the very best show that we can to you. Now, just before we start looking at the flying programme, I'm just going to talk about the weather for a couple of minutes. Indeed, yes, because we mentioned earlier the very important role that gliders played in D-Day. Whilst troops are quite easy to just parachute if you're landing heavy equipment and trying to get into some very awkward places, the technology used in 1940 was the glider. And hundreds were involved in D-Day, all towed, of course.
Literally, the amount of people leaving was stupid. Everyone was going. It's still just a lynx in the swordfish, I think it's called.
Basically now part of Heathrow Airport on the 17th of April 1934 and entered Royal Naval Service 2 years later as the Swordfish Mark I. In all, 2,400 were built. The first 700 or so were built by Fairey Aviation, the remainder under licence by the Blackburn Aircraft Company in Yorkshire, those aircraft often known as Blackfish. And this biplane, open cockpit, in weather like today, remember that's open cockpit, and certainly the crews that flew it, character and guts aplenty. As you'll see, superb handling qualities, especially at low speed and in very windy conditions, the type of conditions you're definitely likely to meet on an aircraft carrier. An amazing performance though. Pilots absolutely marvelled at the fact that they could put it into a climbing turn at just 55 knots, could be dived very steeply and very slowly, level out at extremely low level. These are very important characteristics for a Navy strike aircraft. And even this slow speed could be used to advantage. If you are a fast fighter, it is extremely difficult to get a bead on something that's moving so slowly, that can turn so quickly. It's very easy to open, shoot and miss your shot. And then of course at some stage the aircraft's got to land back on the carrier, so slow speed, good handling, absolutely essential. By the time of what are generally considered to be the Swordfish's greatest achievement, biplane with a cruising speed of just 90 knots or just above 80 knots with an underslung torpedo. But as late as 1944 at D-Day, it still had very important roles to perform. weekend were some of the Allied aircraft that on D-Day laid smoke screens to cover the passage of Channel troopship convoys. They planned to use motor launchers, but they didn't have enough of them with the suitable equipment. And with the help of the smoke screens, a convoy of 10 ships duly made it through the Straits of Dover. 838 Squadron had Swordfish and Harrier in Devon for night patrols off Brittany against Germany's E-boats, their fast patrol craft. Sixth Squadron, along with 2 units of Grumman Avengers, was stationed at Perranporth in Cornwall. And indeed, every time I see a swordfish, I try and imagine what it must have been like in that attack on the Bismarck. Pride of the German fleet, absolutely bristling with guns. They had to make a very slow approach. You are in range for a very long period of time. And of course it was the Swordfish that really cast the die in the chase for the Bismarck. After sinking the Pride of the Royal Navy, HMS Hood, Bismarck was away. It was only the fact that HMS Ark Royal, Swordfish and HMS Ark Royal caught and managed to just put a torpedo into the stern that slowed the Bismarck down and enabled the Hood fleet to make contact and then eventually sink the Bismarck. So what a wonderful sight this is, resplendent in its D-Day markings. And that's the last pass. I'm sure the crew on board had a tremendous view, headed by the aircraft pilot Glenn Allison. And on the south coast today, and they've transited all the way up here from there, and now they're heading back home to Yeovilton. So look directly in front of you. This aircraft has been the bridesmaid twice, but now it's time to take the stage for the Wasp. The most striking feature of this aircraft is that quite long spine, the undercarriage, for a very good reason. It operates on very small helicopter landing pad on the stern of ships. Needs a very sprung undercarriage to take the occasional hard landing. And then there are castering wheels, a bit like a shopping trolley, but hopefully a little bit better to enable the aircraft to be manoeuvred both under its own power and by manpower, literally muscled around small flight decks. As we mentioned earlier, this came from the change in technology, which basically meant that enemy submarines could actually engage surface vessels at a range that didn't work the other way. The surface vessels could not reach out to the submarine. So there had to be a way of extending that military capability off the surface vessel 100 miles or so further out into the sea. And this was the answer. Air power, fleet air arm, the MATCH project, manned torpedo carrying helicopter, bridge that gap. Aircraft could be armed with torpedoes, a range of different torpedoes, also a range of depth charges, including a nuclear depth charge. Very unlikely nuclear bomber. This aircraft did carry WE-177 nuclear munition. There is a drill example actually in the museum, in the Cold War Museum. That was the standard tactical nuclear weapon of the British forces for many years. It had a number of settings, including a very low setting, low nuclear terms, which meant that you didn't actually have to get that close to the submarine to actually destroy it. A near miss was good enough. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? But then we have a look today at the B-bombers, the RAF B-bombers, the National Cold War exhibition here in the RAF Museum on site. Well, here we have another element of the UK's Cold War nuclear forces. The Wasp had already begun to be retired in favour of the Westland fleets by the Royal Navy by the time of the Cosford in 1982. But nonetheless, 11 Wasps served there. They flew 8 ships, which were a mixture of a overland, a army version, not called the Wasp, that was the Scout, very similar airframe. Again, we talked earlier about the early modern Lynx, and the main difference being that the army Lynx had skids, much better for landing on something plain, whereas the Navy version had these casted wheels. Well, that was the same, the Scout, very much like the Wasp, but the biggest difference, the most obvious difference, being that it was equipped skids.
And the Wasp was originally to have been named the Sea Scout, which I think is rather a funny name. The Wasp just carried on in military service into the 21st century. The Royal Navy retired them in 1988 with the last of its Type 12 frigates decommissioned. Indonesia and New Zealand, theirs carried on for another decade, but Malaysia didn't retire the Wasp until the year 2000. This one was only the 7th Wasp delivered to the Royal Navy in 1965. Served various ships' flights, did the Navy wings since summer of 2021, with marking to those linked to 9 squadrons, ships, flight aircraft and operational maintenance Aurora. One interesting point about the undercarriage that Andy was talking about earlier is we can lock the wheels if required, but the Wasp always has to hover taxi. It can't taxi across the ground on its wheels. You'll see this when it's allowed top. And the tail rotor is relatively small, so if you're manoeuvring out of wind, you haven't got very much tail rotor authority. It's quite moderate with Wasp pilots say, so it can be a machine with quite tricky characteristics in certain conditions, but it was beautifully demonstrated there by Tim de la Fosse.
And our friends at Navy Wings, they have a fabulous and growing collection of aircraft. We've seen currently the serviceable Swordfish. They do have